live across the street from Steel and Rye, as some of you know, and my wife and I, who don't have off-street parking, have often faced significant parking challenges. There's the benefit of exquisite cuisine and then the obstacle of sometimes parking. So I reached out to the board in 2014, and there were some tense moments, including one here about a year ago. But Katie Conlon was incredibly responsive over the course of the past year and proactive in working to address this issue along with Anne Marie. Outgoing Chief Wells was also incredibly responsive and seriously considered my concerns at the Traffic Commission meeting last summer. While progress was slow, I was incredibly pleased when the Commission voted to make some adjustments that would hopefully ease some of the parking burdens on Elliott Street. And these changes were swiftly adopted by this board, and I appreciate that, in February of 2016. Cognizant of winter weather, although this winter wasn't that bad, I was very patient in waiting for the changes to actually be implemented. And upon reaching out to the chief and to the town administrator and Ms. Conlon, I learned that the DPW would post the signs and should have already done that. And this is where things became interesting as a citizen. So I reached out to the head of the DPW to inquire as to the status of the signs. And Mr. Lynch on May 13th to my email did not respond. So I decided to stop by the DPW. And I was told I just missed him, but the secretary or administrator in that office said that she didn't know anything about the parking changes, which I could understand. There's lots on their agenda. But also commented that the chief and Joe don't always see eye to eye. And I informed her that it wasn't the job of the DPW to see eye to eye. If the selectmen had voted to make a change, that should be implemented. That's their job. A few days later, Joe Lynch still hadn't responded to my email, so I sent 2 additional emails over the course of a 2-week period, and he did not even have the common decency to respond to my emails. I informed Ms. Conlon of this. She was incredibly responsive, and I appreciate that in addressing this issue and getting the town administrator to round up the head of the DPW and the chief to iron out the issue. And despite their initial attempts, it wasn't happening. Finally, after multiple efforts by you, which I truly appreciate, it did happen. But the reason I'm here today is because this raised serious concerns for me as a citizen taxpayer in Milton. I'm deeply disappointed by the utter lack of professionalism and accountability from the Department of Public Works. Even more disappointing is that I've been learning this sentiment is shared across town. So much so that it was one of Ms. Conlon's campaign initiatives, was improving the delivery of service at the DPW. So I just have 2 closing points for this evening. One is, now that this town-wide contentious election that we had is over, it's time for us to come together as a community and pursue the Conlon platform that the voters elected. We need to improve the delivery of public works at the DPW. Along these lines, I would like to hear concrete proposals from this body in terms of how to improve the delivery of public works service and the customer service interaction between people at the DPW and citizens. I'm not yet convinced that we need to go to the lengths that Providence did with actually instituting customer service training for public employees, but something needs to be done to address this utter lack of responsiveness and the unprofessionalism with which the DPW operated. In other cases I've heard from fellow Miltonians and in my own experience. But that said, the responsibility doesn't only lie with you. Not everyone raises their concerns in a public forum and brings them to your attention. So as a first step, I've started a website called changemiltondpw.com. And people can submit their concerns with respect to DPW work or issues that arise, projects, and their customer service experiences. I, for one, have been ignored many times, and it's just important to footnote here. I initially raised this parking issue in 2014. It's been 2 years. I've only been here twice. I'm not one to come every selectmen's meeting and pound my fist on the table and try to make a scene. That's not how I operate. But I see that taking a relaxed approach with the delivery service at DPW and not raising my concerns earlier did not suit my objectives. So the lackluster approach and the director's intentional intent to ignore my email have led me to think that we need to, as a town, seriously consider the DPW delivery of service and the accountability in that department. And I know Mr. Lynch is present this evening. I would hope that he would exercise the decency and professionalism to reach out to me with an email response. It doesn't need to have any kind of conclusive nature. When I reached out to him initially, he could have just said, let me look into this, or the signs are on order. I shouldn't have to email the entire board, reach out to the town administrator, who has a lot of other important and pressing issues to deal with, to get the DPW to respond to me. The director should have the capacity and the capability to exercise sufficient professionalism and courtesy by responding with an email. So I join the other citizens in Milton in being concerned about the DPW. I seriously hope the board will think about how the delivery of service can be improved. And I would encourage other Milton residents to go to changemiltondpw.com and share their concerns or their great experiences with the DPW being responsive. I want everyone to participate, and hopefully we can get a better picture of how service is being delivered by the department. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board at Citizen Speak?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Normally, we don't allow accusatory citizen speaks without the person here to defend themselves. I mean, that has been the person is here to defend himself. Do we want to give Mr. Lynch a chance to, if he wants to say something?
Mr. Lynch is here.
I would love to.
Hey, Mr. Lynch, I'd ask you to keep this very brief.
Absolutely, I'm going to be factual and not editorial at all.
We do have this on our agenda as the next item under the Traffic Commission.
Exactly. So simply put, the concern was raised with regards to posting of the signs, and there was in fact a flaw in the action that the Traffic Commission took and the recommendation made to this board, and there was a flaw that this board took in voting. Posting the signs in accordance with the vote was physically impossible to do, and you guys have a memorandum from me to that effect. Once we discovered that, Anne Marie Fagan, Chief Wells and I sat down together, and Chief and I get along pretty well. I'm not sure where the conflict might be. We sat down, and I had done a reconnaissance out in the field, and I offered the solution, which is what's before you tonight, and those signs were posted already. There were two actions that were supposed to be taken: converting the signs on the train track side to 2-hour parking. This board voted to do that. Those signs had already existed. There was no need to do it. They were already there as 2-hour parking. The other was to institute service zone parking in an area, and the way it was written was at a single point sharing a line where there was no space that would have been created, and that was the conflict. But nonetheless, I developed a criteria where if we simply did it in front of the two telephone poles, or between the two phone poles, you would affect 4.5 parking spaces, and that's what the action before this board is. I believe that was reduced in writing, not only to you folks, but also to the person who just spoke via an email from me 3 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago. The first response is because I didn't know how to answer and how to provide a logical answer that what was voted by the board was incorrect.
Okay, Mr. Lynch, why don't you stay at the table? I saw no one else for Citizen Speak. Are there any other residents of the town who would like to address the board at Citizen Speak? Okay, then seeing none, the next item on our agenda is a conference with the Traffic Commission. So we have Chief Wells, who's the chair of our Traffic Commission, and Mr. Lynch, our DPW director, is a member of the Traffic Commission. There has been a little bit of discrepancy in what should have been voted and what was voted, and some of the recommendations that were coming through the Traffic Commission to the board. So there's a little bit of history here, and thank you for responding to that, Joe. Chief, would you like to address this as well?
So, and I thank Mr. Crink for his patience, because this has been a long and arduous situation. You've heard me speak about parking in the Central Art Business District for quite some time. One of the things that we did, thanks to the assistance of the town planner, was that we did, before we could even make a decision, and the first request that came to us was to look at the possibility, if you recall, putting residential parking, which we don't have in Milton, into that district, which really would have been a big thing to do. But so what we did do, which took a lot of time, was to do a complete inventory of every space that's in that, both the Central Ave and the Milton Village District, and try to come up with a solution how to make this work. I've often said when I'm here that the biggest eye-opening thing being chairman of the Traffic Commission is it's really an engineering job, not so much an enforcement job. So the recommendation was to swap, which I had conveyed to Mr. Kring-Salton, was to swap 4 spaces. As Mr. Lynch said, I can't answer to the dialogue between Mr. Kring and Joe, but as far as what we voted to do, what our intent was to swap 4 spaces from the Steel and Rye side to the Morton Road, Brook Hill Road side. We took that vote, and when the DPW did go to make the installation, what was reported back to us was that it wouldn't work, it wouldn't be an even swap. We did have that meeting with Anne Marie, which brings the recommendation to you tonight, which is to rescind the vote that was taken by us previously, ratified and enacted by this board, and to rescind it and make a new vote, item 3 on this, to make a new recommendation, which effectively makes the swap, makes it legal, makes it sound, and gives the citizen in this case what he requested in the first place. It doesn't take away, I do want to say that it doesn't take away from the problem of just the pressure of the parking, particularly in the PMs going on each night there. And, I don't see that going away. I don't. It's an issue. And as you saw if you saw in the Globe today, it's great that the population is growing. It's great that we live in an area of the country with real estate. All that brings more people, more cars, pressure on public transportation. So it's something that we're going to have to look at going forward as a community.
And I will add that there was a 2-year process that played out here. That was not the responsibility of the Public Works Department. We didn't have, as the chief alluded to, we didn't have residential parking to address these situations. So we had, and we should publicly credit Tim Zerwinski, who's our assistant town planner, who did a lot of research, went out and visited not only this area, but East Milton Square and some other areas where we have similar situations. So it was a long process, but the 2-year process and delay was owing to a number of factors. We have a proposed motion to rescind the votes and to replace them with the votes that would achieve the purpose that has now been already arrived at.
Okay, I'll make a motion to rescind the following votes taken at the February 23rd, 2016 Board of Selectmen's meeting. Article 5, Section 6, Elliott Street, to designate 4 parking spaces beginning at the southerly property line of 64 Elliott Street to the northerly property line of 74 Elliott Street as service zone. Article 5, Section 7B, Elliott Street, to designate the first 4 parking spaces on the Boston side of Elliott Street beginning at the property line of 95 Elliott Street, northerly to the front entrance of 50 Elliott Street as 2-hour parking. And propose a new motion to approve the recommendation.
I think we should take them
One at a
separately.
time? Yeah.
To rescind the
Okay.
first one.
I will second that motion.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The second motion is to approve the recommendations of the Traffic Commission as follows. Article 5, Section 6, Elliott Street, to designate 4 parking spaces beginning at utility pole number 11, located in front of number 80 Elliott Street and extending northerly to utility pole number 4310, located in front of number 74 to 76 Elliott Street as service zone.
Second.
Any discussion?
Nope.
If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Kring,
you.
for your patience, and Mr. Lynch and Chief Wells for
Thank you
your
all for your help on this.
involvement
I
in
know
this
this took a
matter.
long time. It's just such a, to work within the confines of a long process from when they first came forward to try and find a legal solution to be able to find the parking coastline was just, it was a difficult one. But thank you, and we've had many conversations and many emails.
Right. Chief, you're going to state you have a reserve fund transfer, I'm sorry, a 3%
3%
transfer
transfer.
request on the agenda.
Want me to speak to it?
Yes.
So, as you know, we're at the end of the fiscal year, and pursuant under Chapter 44, Section 33B, the law allows this board, our department, to make a request where we can transfer from one side personnel to salary to personnel, general to salary, and vice versa. So in this case, to make a long story short, there were 2 issues that were pressing. One was we had a request to purchase 2 motorcycles, if you remember that, in our new equipment line, which got cut. And the other is that we did receive a capital award for $51,000 for a new prisoner transport van. The bid, we only received a single bid on that van, which is a custom vehicle, which came in $12,000 over. And I've had an officer on unpaid leave for almost multiple months, and I've been putting that aside. As Mr. Cronin always told me many years ago, try to be thrifty whenever possible. So I'm trying to fill both those right now, utilizing this, and that's how this request comes before you tonight.
Okay. Question, just motorcycles, the condition of the current motorcycles are replaced, they're in tough shape?
These are 06s and 05s.
Yeah.
So.
They really get a beating.
And as you know, in my new equipment, for almost of all the time I've been here, in my new equipment line item, which is in my regular operating budget each year, the contingent, non-contingent, the exercise we've gone through, particularly in us, I'm cutting equipment, I'm adding, so this was a priority, and so I found a way to just kind of tuck that aside to potentially bring this before you at the end of the year. The wagon, as I say, it was, I think we put that forward a year ago. It was awarded by the yacht committee, the capital committee last year, but when the one bid came in, the price on these, it's a custom box, had just gone up so much that it was $12,000 over. So the vehicle is ordered. This was a way for us to be able to find that
Gotcha.
in this group.
Okay.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve and forward to the warrant committee a transfer in the amount of $33,887 from the police department salary and wage line to the police capital outlay, motor vehicle line as requested by the police chief.
I'll second.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous.
Thank you, Chief.
Chief, I know this is probably your last time before the board in your current capacity, so you've served the town of Milton for over 30 years, last 9 years as police chief, and I know we all want to thank you for your service and wish you well in your, wherever life takes you
Thank
next.
you for your service. We
Thank you.
appreciate it.
All right, we'll move on to number 7 on our agenda. We have several people here who may want to join us at the table, but I'll ask Mr. Hurley, who is the person who put this on the agenda and has been working on this, to lead the discussion.
Okay, well, at the last MMA meeting, I went to a session that was, it was a session on construction planning, and it was headed by Dan Pelota. And Dan is owns a firm that is what do they call them? Construction project managers, basically. And every building project over a certain dollar amount requires a construction project manager. You can either do it internally if you have a qualified one internally, or you have to hire one outside. But after listening to him, I thought, we're looking at new fire stations, new DPW facility, and it might be nice to hear from somebody that's been through the process many, many times, just to kind of sit here and just talk about best practices in terms of timelines for when things should happen, and what a construction project manager actually does, and just to basically understand the process. So with that, I'd love to have Dan come up, and I know we have Stan, and do we have somebody representing the fire, right?
We have Fire
Chief
Chief Grant
Mr.
and
Hurley.
our DPW Director, Joe Lynch.
Oh, there you are, Jim. Come on
I'd like
up.
to turn my seat to Stan Janigo, who is the chairman of the DPW's committee. Stan is more than capable of carrying my message.
Stan, please
Yeah,
feel
come on,
free to
join us,
please
please.
join us at the table. Chief Grant? Welcome, Mr. Pilata.
Thank you for having me. I guess I'll start. I did put together a PowerPoint. We can go through it if you like. It's quick. It's very similar to what we went through at MMA. But basically, towns that haven't done a project in a while, the selectmen leave, the administrators leave, and sometimes the process gets lost, that the experience gets lost. So what we tried to do at MMA was kind of remind everybody what the process is to get a capital project going, and some of the best practices. So what I thought I'd do is quickly go through it. Most towns have capital assessment program, a 5-year program that identifies the major needs going down the pipeline. Some of those get funded through the budget. Some of those get put off into a secondary category. They're either funded inside the levy limit or funded outside the levy limit, depending on the wealth of your town. Some towns do it within the levy limit. Most towns don't do it within the levy limit. An example would be the next slide there. Just identifying in fiscal years where the big hits are coming, and can the town afford those big hits? Treasury Department, the Finance Department, the town manager getting together and trying to lay out the big hits as they're coming down the line. You've shown me 2 studies that were recently done, which are perfect feasibility studies, identifying the needs. So you know you have 2 needs coming. You just don't know when you're going to fund them or how you're going to fund them, because maybe you haven't, or maybe you have looked at it in a broad scheme of where the budget's going, or whether they're going to be inside or outside the levy limit. Administering the project, after you've done a feasibility study and you've identified what the cost of the budget is, if it's over $1.5 million, you are required to have an owner's project manager. The owner's project manager must be independent of the designer and independent of the contractor. The owner's project manager can be a town employee. The owner's project management can be an outside firm, but it has to be an owner's project management, and the project manager has to have certain requirements laid out in the law. 7 years experience in this, a licensed architect, licensed engineer. All OPMs that work for school projects have to also go through a course and be certified by the Mass School Building Authority. So if you're doing a school project, which I know you guys did, I gotta say 2005 or so, 2006. Because we were doing one in Hanover at the same time, and we were envious of the amount of money you guys got, 90%.
We got lucky.
And we're still mad.
We got very lucky.
Which brought up a couple of things. In the MMA, we had a gentleman from Lexington, and they do it a little different in Lexington. It was a wonderful way they do it. They have a facilities department that does all their projects, and they don't have building committees for every project. They have the projects that are, smaller, 5 million, 6, 7, 8 million. They do in-house. Sometimes they hire an outside OPM, sometimes they have staff representing the OPM, but they do the projects in-house without large committees. MSBA projects require you to have a committee, and the committee for an MSBA project, should you go down that path, is actually the responsibility of the Board of Selectmen. So they've taken that power away from the schools and given it to the executive branch as a check and a balance, having learned what we all went through during the 2000s with school projects. Your building committees, sometimes appointed by the moderator, sometimes appointed by the Board of Selectmen. A lot of towns have permanent building committees, and the permanent building committees take on project after project after project, retain the knowledge of how the process goes, and know who the good architects are, who the good OPMs are, and, weed out the bad contractors. If the projects are over $10 million, you have to pre-qualify your contractors. Very important if you're appointing a building committee to make sure you have a cross-section of the town, not just engineers and architects, but everyday average citizens that are going to think differently than engineers and architects. Because sometimes the engineers and architects are thinking like this, and the average citizen's saying, I need a sign. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing that?
Right.
Oops, passed the permanent building committee. I put in a political ramification page only because every project has political ramifications. Sometimes it's in the wrong section of town, sometimes it's north versus south, sometimes it's east versus west, sometimes someone doesn't like the chairman of the building committee. It's really important you think about that as you're going down the path for your projects. If you got 3 fire stations that need to be done, don't do 2 in the east, try to do them in need, but separate them out so the residents are all feel they're part of it. Appointing the OPM. This is probably the most important, I consider to be the most important because I'm an OPM piece. Most OPMs can do any project. Someone that does all fire stations doesn't need to be the OPM that does the fire station. It's just a public works project. It can be someone that's never done a fire station. What's really important is that the OPM interacts with the town, that the personality works with the Board of Selectmen or with the town manager, it's very important that you have that. They have to have the minimum requirements, just like the designers do. If that OPM doesn't have those minimum qualifications, they can't be an OPM. But it's really important that communication be two-way and that they listen. So references are really important. Call the references, and don't call the references that they give you. Call the person that's not listed but from the same town. Call the building inspector or the fire chief. Fire chief can tell you every bad contract that there is out there that's put in a crappy fire alarm system. Hiring the OPM is based on qualification, not on price. Once you hire the OPM, you negotiate a fee. 3 stages of public construction: planning, design, and construction. Planning began with your feasibility study. It identified the need. The next step would be to get a schematic design that identifies the cost so that you can get the appropriation. On your 2 projects, you need to go to the schematic design. I would recommend that you guys, put together the necessary committees or system in place to start knocking the projects off. Even if they're years down the line, it never hurts to start planning way ahead. The residents will start seeing it in the paper. They'll know it's coming. The town meeting members will know it's coming. All the boards will know it's coming. The finance department can start planning for it, and everybody knows that it's coming down the line. It's good morale, too, for the staff that knows finally that someone's listening to them, that the building's falling down over their head, that the roof leaks on them, and so on and so forth. Once you get to design, you got to hire an architect, and that's the next slide. And hiring the architect is similar to hiring the OPM. It's qualification-based. A little bit interesting on architects is some architects do a really good job. Some architects don't do a really good job, just like OPMs. You have to weed it out through the qualification process. Research the devil out of them, because you're going to be stuck with them, and they're creating legal documents that bind this town. So the OPM's advising you, but you're creating legal documents that you're going to be owning as a town. As soon as you start the project, you've inherited risk for the town. So the designer has to be the right designer, and you're going to know when you have the right designer, going through all the packages that they have. That's also qualification-based. Construction's the same way, except for we're bound by bidding, which means it's all price-based. And I have absolutely no doubt that Milton's had a bad contractor in the past. I'm sure you've had a project that didn't get finished right, or punch lists that weren't completed for ever and a day. One of the great things that's happened in the last 5 years is that a couple of cases have gone through, giving the town more authority to reject bids. You don't have to take the lowest bid if they're not a responsible contractor. It's not like the old days where you opened it up, you took the low number and you left. If you open it up and the low number is somebody that you know is not going to do the job because you've got a dossier on them, you can reject their bid. Very, very important. I won't go into the file subbidding and the general bids, but that's a whole night meeting on its own, so you can skip those 2 slides, but I don't want to bore you with it, other than to say that the bidding laws in Massachusetts are archaic and need to be revamped, but it's not going to get done while you guys are on this board or before I retire. I can guarantee that. Bonds and insurances are important too. Make sure that you've got a bond and insurance town council. The bonds, not from like the Marshall Islands or somewhere, they're like they're real bonds with real securities, because you may have to call them. They do pay. We've had 2 projects in the past 2 years where the bonding company had to come in, 100% professional. They paid the contractors, they paid the project. Project was delayed, but they got completed. The taxpayer didn't lose a dime. So make sure that you have all your bonds. Budget and contingency, real quickly. I want to caution the town when you're doing a project not to talk about numbers till the schematic design is done. You've established the budget. Because as soon as someone opens their mouth and says a number, that number becomes public. It becomes coffee shop talk. And it gets very difficult to get past that number, whether it's higher or lower or in between. There are estimators today can get this down to 1 to 2%. even in schematic design, to what the final cost will be. The OPM and the designer will be doing estimates all along the way to ensure the budget doesn't get passed. And when you establish your budget and you get your appropriation, make sure you have an adequate contingency, at least 5% on a new building, at least 10% on a renovation, in case of unknown things, you hit an oil tank or whatever. Very, very important that you don't have to go back to town meeting, but I don't have to tell you guys that. Change orders, all you ever hear about construction is change orders. All projects have change orders. Expect them. Embrace them, because it means they've caught something. It's not a bad thing. Make sure your OPM identifies who's responsible for the change orders. If the architects are making a lot of mistakes and the change orders start piling up, it's time to sit down with the architect and talk about what he's going to do to rectify it, what he's going to get back to the town. If the responsibility is unknowns, they're unknowns. If they're change orders because the contract is being greedy, you reject them and dig in for the legal battle. But you will have changes. Every job has changes. Don't be shy when you see them. And the last item I want to talk to you about is commissioning, which is something that MSBA has perfected, and we should all do on all projects, but does not get done on fire stations and senior centers and DPW garages like it should. The MSBA will do commissioning and pay for it themselves, so they know that their investment was built correctly, and when you walk in that school, the HVAC system's working, the lighting's working, and so on and so forth. Too many projects in the past 2 decades by all of our towns, my town included, have had projects that are done, and a year later, they're coming back to town meeting with major problems with the HVAC and major problems with windows and leaks and so on and so forth. Doesn't have to be anymore. There's a whole industry called commissioning out there. It's not expensive. Build it into your budget. Make sure your projects get commissioned, because if you don't build it in your budget, it's going to go to furniture. It's going to go to, something that somebody wanted that didn't get in the original plan. That's what happens with these projects. Selectmen role is huge. You guys are the policymakers on which projects are going to go forward. How many projects in town go forward when the selectmen don't support the project? Practically none. Policy on what projects will go forward, policy on master planning, policy on administrating, whether you have a permanent building committee, individual building committees, or town staff that administer the project. Very, very important that the Board of Selectmen establish all those policies before you start hitting those projects. That way, no one can turn around and say, we did it this way on this one, we did it that way on that one. The policies are all there. There's a tremendous amount of resources out there for you, too. I put them on the last slide here. I don't, you probably have on your laptops there. Feel free to look them up. Any decisions, any paperwork from the IG and the AG, they have wonderful guides to help the layperson, and they're in pretty good English. You don't need a PhD, and you have to understand how, electrical circuits go together to understand them, to help us, those of us that are in government. I'm in government too, so all of us need a hand once in a while. So that's basically it in a nutshell. I wanted to go zip through it because I know I was a selectman for 6 years, and I know you poor guys are going to be here till 11. So we had a little more luxury at the MMA, but I did want to let you know that I read your stuff. You're going down the right path. I hope you get your projects going. The longer you wait, the worse it's going to be for every project. Establish that long-term goal. Get everyone to buy into it, because the town's assets aren't going away, but they will crumble.
Dan, the OPM, at what point would the OPM get hired in a project?
As soon as you've identified it's over $1.5 million, the OPM should get hired. Like when you're doing your feasibility studies, you don't have a number. You know it's bad, but you don't have a number. You do your feasibility study. The OPM doesn't need to be involved in it. Mm-hmm. Committee's identifying the problems. At some point, someone's throwing a dart at what they think it's going to cost. Mm-hmm. Usually the dart's wrong, but usually it's over $1.5 million. And once you hit that $1.5 million threshold, and you go to the next step, schematic design, the first step in the process is hiring an OPM. The OPM does get hired under Mass General Law, Construction Reform Act, prior to the designer. The OPM shall assist you hiring the designer.
Okay,
Doesn't make the decision for you, assists you.
right.
Lays out
Basically, your
lays out the
consultant.
process, makes sure that you understand everything, and is there to help you.
Mm-hmm.
But all the ultimate decisions are the town of Milton's.
Okay. And does the OPM primarily work with the building committee, work with the selectmen? How would-
The OPM can work with however you set it up.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a building committee, the OPM would be working probably more with the building
committee,
committee.
yep.
When you go to the day-to-day activity, there's probably a town interaction, certainly with the town administrator when there's a legal issue. But nothing that the building committee is the ultimate authorization if you set it up that way at town meeting. So the OPM will be working for the building committee to implement the project and getting its policy direction from and day-to-day direction from the building committee.
And from what I heard you say, even though we may be 8 or 10 years away from actual being able to fund some of these things, schematics should happen well before.
Well, I think, personally, I think if you're 8 to 10 years away and you've identified the need now, you're probably not really 8 to 10 years away. You're talking a financial,
Well, they may fall down before it.
right, I mean, you're letting a financial policy dictate when the project goes, and that's fine. Maybe the debt from the other schools are coming off the rolls, and you want to fill that debt with new debt. Those type of economic analysis should be done in your 5-year capital plan, but if you're 8 years out, I would start probably between year 4 and 5 with the schematic design at the latest, maybe even 3 and 4. Start with the schematic designs, get your designers and everything lined up so you can have a nice leisurely walk to your appropriation in
Okay.
year 6 or so, and then get the construction. When you're doing the construction, it's an interest-only loan. It's usually not a big hit until you issue the final bonds.
Right.
So you're on a ban or a GAN if it's a grant.
Yep.
And, when that final debt hits is when the taxpayers see that big jump, and you get the phone calls at home, and you wish you did run for Board of Selectmen.
Now, how about, Dan, setting up the building committee? Obviously, we've had committees now meet, to discuss these projects. But to establish that actual building committee, when do you foresee that along?
Well, you should have a building committee as soon as you know you're going down the path for a building. So I would establish the building committee prior to the beginning of schematic design.
Okay.
And the first task of the building committee would be to hire the OPM and the designer. And I don't know how it's done in Milton, whether it's the selectmen that appoint the building committee or whether it's the town moderator.
The schools was definitely the moderator. I'm not sure about the library. Was that the moderator too?
I believe it was.
It's probably how you write your articles or how your charter is written. I don't know how your charter, sometimes it's in the charter. Sometimes, you have enough time to maybe establish a permanent building committee or establish a different way of doing business between now and you're ready to go. It's an option. I mean, you should look at, you're not an unsophisticated town. You're a sophisticated town. This isn't the Berkshires. You should be looking at every option possible.
It's good to understand the timeline. I think it kind of sets us up, because we do know what's coming down the pike, and
It's coming.
to get everything in order, and so that it's an easy ride.
Yeah, you don't want to be rushing. When you rush it, there's mistakes. I mean, you want continuity. If you've got someone retiring in the middle of it, it doesn't help the project when you start with Fire Chief A. The drawings are 60%. I'm picking on fire chiefs tonight. The drawings are.
I'm getting ready to renegotiate.
The fire chief says, the drawings are 60% done, and then a new fire chief comes in and redraws it. That's an expense to the town. So sometimes you tag it to longevity too. There's a lot of little factors, but Lexington's got a wonderful model with their permanent committee and having their staff do it. Weston does it the same way. Needham does it the same way. They're similar communities to Milton, so there are good ways to do this without having to do the repetitive building committee route and seeking volunteers that, when they're done, you lose all that history and knowledge. The next building comes up and has to start learning all over again. That's the downfall of a volunteer government.
Yeah, the one thing when we met last week that you had mentioned was, which we do have a capital committee, obviously. We do a 5-year plan, but as you said, a lot of our capital is really repair and maintenance.
Fire trucks.
Yeah, it's
police
equipment
cars.
and repair and maintenance to a large degree, and by the time you get to the big stuff, you've already spent all the money on the little stuff, and it doesn't get into the plan. But you were saying like Lexington really mapped out the big stuff over a
They
long period
map
of
out the
time.
big stuff, and North Andover, we're doing converting a fire station to a town hall addition, because the fire station and town hall were built together, and fire station moved out to a beautiful new facility. So the town hall is expanding into the fire station. This is the 6th project in a 7-year capital plan they identified to their town meeting within the levy limit. So they're funding it within the levy limit, which is wonderful for North Andover. But it's become a routine for the town meeting members to know that the projects are coming. They know it was on a plan, and they know that the first 5 were done on time and on budget, and the 6th one will be done on time and on budget. So when the 7th one comes, it's not a shock to anybody. And then they're going to do another 7-year plan. That's how they do it in North Andover, and it works wonderful.
Well, Milton was fortunate in that over the course of about 15 years, we built a new senior center, renovated or rebuilt or brand-new schools, 6 new schools, and the library renovation project. So an awful lot happened in a fairly short period of time.
Did, yeah.
Here.
Are they all outside, they're all debt exclusion?
Yeah, I'm not sure about the
Most of it.
senior center, but
I think that one might be paid off. I'm not positive.
everything else was debt exclusion.
I mean, people will pay for it if they want the services. They will go, they will. But it's got to be bulletproof. When you go to town meeting, there's a lot of smart people in town meeting that will stand up and destroy a project. So if that project's not bulletproof, it's not going to pass, and nor should it.
Very true.
Mr. Janika or Chief Grant or any of the other members of the committees who are in the audience, anyone have any comments?
Yeah, might I just make a comment really supporting what Mr. Pilato here says? I have a fair amount of experience managing projects, as some of you know, including multi-billion-dollar projects. And that makes me maybe a critic and a cynic in some ways. In the last 8 or 10 years, I've consulted on them. I haven't been responsible for them, but I've been consulting on them. And I would share that experience that he mentions. You've got to have the right person managing this. I don't know every town employee, but I think I can say here without fear of contradiction that there's nobody employed by this town that can manage a $30 million project with 12, 14 different phases over 3 to 4 years. That's a complicated process. And people grow into that by managing a $100,000 project and then $500,000 one, and then be the deputy on a $10 million one. That's how they grow into that. And they get, earn their spurs, if you will, and you don't take somebody and throw them in a $30 million project unless they've grown up, if you will, through that experience. Whether that's 5 years or 20 years is not material, but the experience is. I guess I would also say that even the towns which have a building department, you said, or section of some sort, those folks are managing the $50,000 repair job and the $100,000 repair job, and they're not unimportant. But the notion of throwing those people into a $30 million project, again with the 12, 14 phases over 3 years, is simply wrong. You're looking for failure. You're almost demanding it if you do that. And so I didn't come here with the notion of supporting what you do for a living, but I think it's very important. I still consult on it somewhat, and I will tell you that the largest cause of failures is taking unqualified people internally, including a firm that I worked for not all that long ago. I tried to work for, but they had a young man who had done a good job putting a new IT system in, and so they thought he could manage a $2 billion construction job. And when I last saw it, it was up to $3.2 billion and about a year and a half longer in timeline. That's what happened. So
Sounds like the Green Line.
well, this was out of state, but yeah, it's close. But I just want to support the plant the seed in your heads with the benefit of my experience that the town has got to do this, given the money that is at stake here and the reputations and everything else at stake.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, though. The one thing you don't want to go back to town meeting time after time.
No,
You know,
no.
well, we were wrong, we need a little more money, we need a little more, I mean, that's just not going to play,
Yeah.
obviously.
And I wish I got 90% for my schools. I would have done all 6 of mine, too.
So you can get 90% for firehouse.
No, firehouses are tough.
What we've done to date, I can say from the very start of our interview process with the firms we interviewed, every one of them, including the one we hired, recommended exactly what he said, OPM early, external OPM early in the project. And I can also echo what he said as far as dollars. We haven't really spoken about money yet, and there's been figures thrown out there as to what our project's going to be.
Right.
I will say we're ahead of the game from your schedule in that we are very close to having schematics done. We expect that we'll be sitting with you sometime in the near future to go over those.
Okay.
Okay, anything else on this topic? Because we do have 2 other committees who are here tonight to meet with us on different matters. Anything else from anyone?
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for coming in. We appreciate the information.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Well, should we do Chief Grant's fire report? Chief, we have you on the agenda for an update on the fire department.
I apologize for that, and Emery can back me up on this and say that I told her yesterday that I'm going to be a day off all week long. So I had been out of town all day, and Emily called, and we were just wrapping up dinner at Abbey Park, and I said, I'll be there in 2 minutes. So this month here, again, looking at this the other day, just a little bit over our average. I can't say that we've really had anything out of the ordinary as far as runs that would stand out to report on individually.
One big fire. Everyone knows what the damage.
We're 2 quarters back. I forget about that when we. $1 million is probably wrong on that, by the way. But yes, one big fire.
Okay.
Yeah, that property wouldn't have been valued at, well, geez, maybe in these days it is. But I wouldn't put it over, maybe right at. Beyond that, in what we're doing more recently is right in the middle of getting a new engine ordered to replace engine 4.
Any questions for the chief or comments on the report?
Really don't.
No, pretty typical.
It really is, like I say, there has, really been nothing that stood out that, like I say, is worth reporting individually on. It's funny, like I say, there's a lot of stuff that we consider routine that the rest of the world may not, but it's been a routine couple of quarters for us.
Right.
Okay, if we have nothing else for the
I don't
chief,
have anything.
then thank you very much, chief.
Great, thank you.
Thanks for coming in.
My apologies.
Pilot next, okay. All right, the next item on our agenda is a discussion of our pilot program and the policy, and we have, I believe, the the current chair of the pilot committee and members of our board of assessors and the chief appraiser who are here. If all of you would like to come up, we can pull up some extra chairs. If you'd rather not, that's fine too. Right, and Mr. Burns asked, did we put this on the agenda? Do you want to lead us in this discussion?
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to, Brian, thank you, and Dimitri, and Bob, and Jim, and Phil for coming in. The pilot program is something that, I met with a group of assessors at one point last year, and they gave a really good overview of where we stood, and it's greatly appreciated that you guys took the time to put such a great report together. One of the things that I hadn't seen was some information, Jim, that you shared today. I don't know if you have a copy of anyone has a copy of that, but it kind of outlines, Jim, when you were chair, some of your thoughts on...
I was on the committee.
On the committee, okay.
Dimitri's chair.
Okay, you're the chair. So some of the ideas of how we could get some of the biggest land users and nonprofits, ultimately, collectively, to come together and work together, to benefit our tax base. So what I thought was it was a good idea, and thank you, Ms. Chair, for allowing this group to come in tonight, to kind of get back to the board here, come together, put some of the good work that you've put in front of us, and decide, form potentially a new committee to now move forward on some of your suggestions and recommendations. So from that point, I'd love to hear a little bit of feedback from you guys on where we are now, and any recommendations you may have for seeing how we could get together with some of these institutions to eventually start to solve the problem that we're faced with.
And could I neglected to ask, could you all just introduce yourselves so that the TV audience knows who you are?
Sure. I'm Dimitri Petion, Chair of the Pilot Committee.
I'm Jim Henderson. I was a member of the Pilot Committee, or I guess I still am, and also a member of the Board of Assessors.
Bill Bennett, member of the Board of Assessors.
Brian Cronin, Board of Assessors.
Thank you.
So Dimitri, as chair of the Pilot Committee, obviously we've had a lot of information come before us. Where you guys sit now, I know you've probably spoken about this, and this is something that, obviously Boston has, being a big city, has found ways to extract money from the nonprofits. It's been very difficult for towns across the Commonwealth to do so, but we do have some of our biggest property owners as nonprofits, and I think that from my perspective, looking for ways to get these groups together at the table to find ways to improve the communication and delivery.
What we have found in our research, going back to when the committee was put together in 2014, was that Milton was not unique in terms of the situation that exists in Milton, where 41% of our taxable land base is owned by nonprofits and is tax exempt, so therefore we're not deriving any revenues from that. What we have found was other towns, such as Andover and other communities that had similar makeup in terms of number of educational institutions, healthcare institutions, were able to engage those entities and to get those entities to participate in pilot or payment in lieu of taxes. In Milton, where we're looking at 41% tax exempt land, we have 59% of our residents being looked at as far as levies are concerned to pay for and provide the services that's needed for the town to run effectively. Similar to Boston, we believe that it's important at this point, since we have presented our report to the board, for the board to engage, to empower the town manager to begin a dialogue with the nonprofits that we have identified in town, especially the 3 or 4 big ones who own land over property over $10 million in assessment, for those organizations to start participating in a formal pilot program in Milton. We have, for example, one organization here in Milton that participates in pilot programs in Boston and Brookline, but not in Milton. So I think it's important for us to go out and start talking to these entities, bring them back to the table and get them to understand that the same reason that brought them to Milton, and that Milton is a great community, we're close to Boston, and we have a lot to offer, are the very same reasons why they need to be very good citizens and participate in pilot. And when we looked at the concept of a pilot, it didn't have to be all cash in. Some of these entities are providing services or are able to provide other services to the town that the town can benefit from. So our approach was, if the pilot levy was X, we'll take half of X and say that can be provided as a service to the community. So, for example, if we have educational institutions that own various ballparks, et cetera, they can let town sports use those facilities, and they can count a portion of that usage towards their pilot payment. So we have to find interesting ways of engaging these folks so that they don't feel that they're being hit over the head with a serious financial burden. The other thing that we looked at was the possibility of the town creating a nonprofit that would allow these organizations more or less contribute in ways that can help us defray costs. One suggestion was the fire chief was just here, and we know how badly we need to refurbish or replace many of our firehouses. Wouldn't it be nice to have a concept of a Curry Firehouse or a Milton Academy Firehouse, where these institutions, as part of their pilots, may decide to sponsor a portion of the construction costs associated with these structures that we need to build, and have the naming rights, if you would, to those structures, and we can get contribution in that manner as well.
I think that there's no question with the amount of services that go out, and not to pick on Curry, but to use Curry as an example, you know, the police and fire are making calls there regularly, you know, and it's impacting our tax base. I know they do contribute a small portion, but I think, you know, when you look at Milton Academy as well, and Beth Israel Deaconess Milton Hospital, you know, it would be great to get some sort of dialogue going with all of them, including others, to find out what essentially they do give in quote-unquote in-kind services, you know, to find out, because, you know, at some point they are giving a lot, you know, and they should be able to articulate that. So I like the proposal on saying that, you know, potentially half of the amount could be based on that. But I think that I would want to recommend to this board and to our town administrator that we re-energize a committee again, and ask our town administrator to reach out to these, to the presidents of each organization, and call together a meeting, and have some dialogue, and start to move forward on finding ways that you know, we can come up with adequate solutions for our taxpayers here in Milton, and to benefit the services that are going out those doors.
I guess let me ask the committee, because part of the problem was, and unlike Boston, where there are a number of not-for-profits that would fall into the category that would be in these voluntary pilot agreements, here it's probably only 4 or 5 not-for-profits that would actually fall into the category of, the rest of them would be exempt.
I would say primarily would be 3.
Yeah,
Top 3.
Yeah.
And then there might be some others, but the major contributors, if they were contributing, would be Curry, Milton,
Right.
Milton Academy, and the hospital.
And they were not particularly willing to come to the table originally. I mean, I guess, how do you get them to the table?
I think you'd also have to add the Eustis, the historical. And I know they typically don't give those, but it's a piece of property that will be running events and, you know, potentially weddings, and
Right.
you know, obviously services could or would have to be provided at some point in time. So I'd like to just add that as another point.
I think one of the key things from our report was not necessarily to just say to target those 3 organizations.
No, you did have a formula.
We had a formula that we were using. Because the town does not have an existing pilot in place, our objective was to set a low water mark in terms of real value of property owned by institutions in town, that we would start there and roll out a pilot program. And once that pilot program was successfully effectuated, then we would go back and move that bar down a little bit and bring other folks into it. There's nothing to say that we can't start at $5 million and move up. But the recommendation of the committee was, let's start at $10 million. Anyone who has property 10 millions or above, start with that initial grouping, get that initial group engaged and involved in the process, iron out any issues that we may have as a town in terms of formulating a successful policy and carrying that policy out to the population, and then having this body come back and look at that $10 million number to say, okay, now we can bring that down because we have this process down.
So that being said, I think you're correct, Eustis probably does fall in that.
It does, and one of the things that I see, and I saw it while working in the city of Boston on the pilot program, I think the big charge would be, obviously you want to get the money based upon the formula that you have. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, if we have a good, strong committee, which we have, okay, and we have good conversations with these groups, there are benefits that our citizens, our taxpayers can get, okay? And to do this assessment, sort of an assessment from each, whether it be Milton Hospital, Milton Academy, or Curry, to find out exactly what they are currently providing or what they potentially could be providing. So we could do an assessment with our residents as well at the same time. What benefit could we get from, say, a Curry College or a Milton Academy in terms of higher education opportunities for seniors? Or I'm just throwing out examples, but there are plenty of opportunities, not just included sports, that we could get that has a real dollar value attached to it. So, they are a part of our community. We are responding to emergency calls, among other things. We ultimately, at the end of the day, should be getting more as a town from each, or have them tell us that they are doing, say, $10 million worth of activity. I would like to know, though, and I think that, re-energizing a group to look into what effectively we're getting out of this, then I think it is a good idea.
I think in addition to the involvement with the parks and stadiums, et cetera, that the town can leverage, I think if we look at Boston, most of the academic institutions in Boston, the BUs, the Northeasterns, they all commit a certain number of scholarship, for example, to local Boston public high school kids, and that's part of their pilot payment program. If we look at Roxbury Latin, for example, in West Roxbury, if you are if you live in West Roxbury, there are a certain number of scholarships that they provide and certain other support that they provide to that community. So we can look to our institution, and because this concept of pilot been going on for a while, if we can bring these folks to the table, they themselves might be able to suggest ways that they might want to participate in pilot that might be acceptable to this body. For example, the hospital may participate in pilot by sponsoring a diabetic day or diabetes day where they can do finger testing or other activities and count a portion of what they spent, which is something that they would want to do anyway, maintaining the well-being of the community, and count a portion of that towards pilot. So there are a lot of creative ways, if we look at other communities, how these organizations can actively participate.
But the recommendation of the pilot committee was, what, 25% be in kind?
25% of what the total levy would be.
Right, and the 75% would be a cash payment.
50% of the 25%.
50% of the 25% would be cash.
Cash payment, okay. Oh, yeah, well, yeah, 25% of the recess, yes.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
And those are great points, and that's exactly what I think that we'd want to get out of this, and we'd want to, charge each institution or, place it to develop their own committee, to be able to give what they currently do. So I think, my opinion is that I'd like to make a recommendation to Chair and to you, Tom, and our town administrator, that we look at creating a new committee with people who are still serving from this committee to move forward to get the leaders and ask our town administrator.
So an implementation committee.
An implementation committee and to contact the leaders of these groups to bring them in so that we can open dialogue and start to have a continual dialogue.
Yeah, I certainly support that.
Yeah, I think we could put that on a future agenda. I think the first step needs to be, we actually never did adopt this policy. We had a very positive discussion about it within the past year, but we'd have to, I think, do that, and we could do them at the same time.
Sure.
Adopt the policy officially, and then
I think the
move forward
policy
with
itself
an
is, you're right, we had a
implementation
very fair discussion, and I think we
Yes.
all like the presentation and the concept, so.
So we could consider tonight a second reading and bring it back at the, for a vote at the same time as moving forward with the next step.
Let's do that.
Do any of our Board of Assessors members anyone else have any other comments tonight?
I think it is important to know that I think the conversation with these 3 or 4 has to be very constructive. I know when the new hospice came into town, they approached the board. They wanted to be a good neighbor. They were tax exempt, but they wanted to pay their fair share. And we were able to work with them and assess the property, and they feel as if they're helping the town and doing their part to relieve the burden for the taxpayers. And I think the others should do that as well, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the tough part is getting them to the table.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Anyone else? Any other comments? Anyone? No. Okay, then, I know June 22nd is very busy. We could try for that night, or we could, if not that night, maybe the early July meeting.
I'd like to, in July would be fine, but I think that, I would like to target, getting a new implementation committee together, and work with the current group, and then, and work on getting, a fall meeting scheduled.
I agree, we should get going on this thing,
Yeah.
we really should. So.
All right.
Thank you all for coming. Thanks,
Thank you.
Brian.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
You're welcome.
Thank you to Mr. Chair Petion and your entire committee. I know
Thank
not
you
all of
again.
them are here tonight, but it was a committee that did a lot of work. Thank you.
Thanks.
Do you want to move the town administrator report up? Okay, we have, yes, we have members of our police chief screening committee who are here. So I'd ask the board, unless anyone has any objection, why don't we move item number 23, which is the town administrator's report, up, and ask our police chief screening committee members to join us at the table.
Finally. Brian? Hi. John, how you doing?
Hi, John. How are you?
Nice to see you.
See you. Lieutenant Collins, how are you?
How you doing?
How are you?
Steve, how are you?
Walsh is to introduce the committee before we turn it over to the town administrator for
Be my pleasure.
Comments?
I wish the whole committee could be here. We're actually a 5-member committee, and I have to tell you, a terrific committee. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed working with each and every one of these people. A tremendous amount of talent, focused on the job. And so we'll start with my neighbor, John O'Connor. John brought a lot of experience from law enforcement in general, and so I don't know, John, want to say a few words?
No, I was just happy to be on the committee. Thank you for letting me do that.
And we have Lieutenant Collins with us now. I have to tell you, it was great to work with Lieutenant Collins. He would have been just another fine example, and I'd like the opportunity to share with you my opinion about the applicants in general, but he would have been another fine example of the members of the leadership team of the Milton Police Department. I mean this as sincerely as I can. I think it would have been terrific for every resident of the town of Milton to have seen the quality of candidates that we had the opportunity to interview. You know, there's so much going on. The police are such a focus around our nation in a lot of instances over the last several years, and I have to tell you, everyone should sleep comfortably in the town of Milton. No, we have a terrific leadership team with the right focus, tremendous talent. So anyway, Lieutenant Collins, we wish he would have been an applicant as well, but certainly another good example. Mr. Collins, Lieutenant, watch.
I just want to thank the board for the opportunity to serve on the committee. I also want to just say, as a member of the police department, I was really encouraged by this group that was put together. They were an objective group. They were diligent. They're extremely perceptive. They brought a different experience and expertise to the table, but it meshed really well. And under Brian's chairmanship, we came to a unanimous conclusion recommendation, and it was really a great group to work with and a great process. So thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Another terrific member, we have Stephen Keel. Stephen, you want to share a few of your observations?
I would just echo the words that have been said so far. Just a tremendous committee to work with. I think it was we got right down to business. We were able to move right through things. Objectively, I think, approached the questions, the issues, really identified the top candidates quite quickly. But I would agree that the applicant pool was just a very talented applicant pool, which made it easier in the long run for us. And I appreciated the opportunity to be part of the committee. Great group.
And not with us tonight, but, certainly a great member of the committee as well, Bill Curran, not able to make it, but just another terrific, participant. And one other observation, because I want to share with you, which is sort of interesting. I didn't keep track of the number of applicants that said this, but several applicants went out of the way toward the end to say, look, they know there are several tremendous applicants applying for this job, and we're fully supportive of our recommendations, and felt comfortable that no matter what we do, it would be the town well served. It really was, it was sincere. It was not just sort of a line that an applicant might have used. So, terrific process. And last thing I'd say, we were charged with presenting 3 candidates to the town administrator. We felt comfortably that all 3 of them could go on and be a very successful chief of police in this town. And so I know we'll all rest very comfortable with whatever decision has been made. So thank you again. It was a pleasure. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thanks for all the services.
Yeah, incredible service that you guys provided on our behalf. Especially with all of the background and the history and the experience that you all have. It's
Well, Anne Marie was a big help keeping us focused, too.
Well, and she had to eventually step off the committee before you even started your interviews because the law changed. And so our board appointed you as a committee when the town administrator decided to keep you all on. She was very happy and said glowing things about the committee. So we thank you all for your service. And you all brought different backgrounds to it. I know Tom and I had the pleasure of serving on the warrant committee with Steve Keel and John. And Steve's background in substance abuse and opioid was an important thing for this committee to be looking at, and John's got all the law enforcement background. So not that Lieutenant Collins doesn't, but another perspective as well. And of course, our former moderator brought a lot to the table. So thank you all for serving.
Thank you.
We turn it over to the town administrator.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to echo my sentiments. Being on that committee was one of the best committees I've ever sat on. Each one of these men were so committed to the process. And Brian was a wonderful chair. And Mr. O'Connor, you were a great recording secretary. You had your times and your votes down, and it was a pleasure. It was sad when I did have to come off the committee because of the change in the bylaw, because it was really a great committee to work with. So I thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, I would, as Mr. Walsh said, the committee did forward 3 names to me. And I did interview all 3 of those candidates, and I had your Assistant Town Administrator, Paige Ippolito, in on those interviews as well. We asked each of the 3 candidates 6 questions, and then we gave them a little bit of homework to do. We gave them 3 questions, 3 really well-thought-out questions, really in-depth questions that we wanted them to take home and to spend a couple of days really thinking about crafting their answers to those questions. I am happy to report that this is one of the most difficult decisions I have had to make in my 21 years working for the town of Milton. This past week has been very, very stressful, a lot of sleepless nights, because you have the best police force that anybody could ever ask for. The men and women of this department and the people that I interviewed are exceptional, and any one of these 3 could fit and walk into this police chief position tomorrow and do an excellent job. So this was a very, very difficult decision for me. Having said that, I did speak with each one of the 3 candidates today personally, and I have appointed, subject to successful contract negotiations and personnel board approval, John King, your deputy chief, as your next police chief, effective July 1st, 2016. John has worked for the town of Milton for 24 years, started as a cadet, moved up the ranks, was appointed to patrol officer, moved up quickly to sergeant, then lieutenant, and has been your deputy chief for the last few years. I think his transition to police chief will be a smooth transition. During his interview, I was so impressed with his answers to each of the questions. They were well thought out. He could really think on his feet. His education and his skill set is exceptional. His strategic plan for where he wants to take this department going forward into the future, I think is one that you will be very impressed when you do meet with the police chief, hopefully June 22nd. And I can't say enough good things about Mr. King. I can't say enough good things about the other two candidates, Mr. Cherry and Mr. O'Neill as well. They are both exceptional human beings, had great interviews, provided great insight to the department and where they wanted to take and lead the department. And again, it was one of the most difficult decisions I've ever made. I was also impressed with the number of people that called me and did not want their names mentioned. John is the epitome of a civil servant. And there were people that told me stories about how John King has personally helped them through crises and had stayed with them through the whole process and followed up with them afterwards. And nobody's ever heard about it but these individual families. And the stories that people told me were amazing. And having worked with John for a number of years, I know they're true, and I know how hard he worked for these people. I will say I worked with John initially on the opposite side of the table during negotiations when he was the president of the union, and once he became the deputy chief, there was no one happier than me to have him on my side of the table to negotiate with me. And so he brings a wealth of knowledge in labor law and negotiating. He has got extensive experience in budgeting and forecasting. Again, I think he's a real strategic planner, and I am comfortable and I am happy with this decision to appoint John King as your next police chief for the town of Milton.
Oh, that's great.
It's great news, and congratulations to John, but again, congratulations to all the candidates, and
yes.
to echo Brian's comment earlier, that they'd feel comfortable with any one of the selection is a real tribute to the department, and to follow your path and what you said, and thank you, Michael, for your service. We're very fortunate as residents to have you guys in your leadership, your experience, and really the compassion that you all have and the pride for our town. So at the end of the day, we're very fortunate, so thanks.
Yeah, and
You really truly are.
like you said, it was a tough decision. You almost couldn't go wrong, but that made your job even harder to say, to just look for the fine little details that separated one from another. But I think you did recommend 3 strong candidates, and I think our town administrator has chosen the correct one. But you're right, you really couldn't go wrong with any of the 3.
Oh no, they're exceptional men. And, as Mr. Burns said, we have an unbelievable police department. We really, really do. And we are very, very fortunate. The men and women in that department work so extremely hard for the town of Milton. And again, it was one of my toughest decisions, but I have to tell you, I'm very pleased with the decision. Very confident that John King will move that department forward in the right direction. It'll be a very smooth transition, and I know he has the support of the men and women in his department. I know he's very, very highly thought of in that department.
Well, I echo everything that Mr. Burns and Mr. Hurley said, and thank you. Congratulations, first of all, to Deputy Chief King, but thank you to the town administrator and to the search committee for all of your work. Obviously, you mentioned it was a lot of sleepless nights, so I'm sure it was, given the quality of the candidates. And
yes.
Thank you for all the work you did. And in this first time that the town administrator has chosen a position this significant in the town, so I think you went through a good process and put in a lot of effort and time and work, and that's really all the taxpayers and the residents can ask for. You've reached a result where you, as others have said, you couldn't go wrong with any of the 3, but I think you made a well thought out choice and followed a very good process. So thank you for all you did.
And I think it's so fitting that, as you head towards your retirement and after all the service that you provided on our behalf in the town, that you were able to make a significant appointment. I think it's a real tribute to
I'm
you.
really honored and humbled to be able to
So thank you.
make this appointment.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
you all.
everyone.
And I
Thank
look
you.
forward to serving with these exceptional men on another committee.
That sounds like a draft.
Good night.
Good night, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
I think that puts us
Item 10?
back, if there's anything else for the town administrator's report, why don't we take it at the end of the meeting and move on
Yeah.
to number 10,
Yeah.
which is the town clerk's request. This is a request to postpone the October 2016 special town meeting. The town administrator and I had a conference with the town clerk and with town council, and the town clerk's rationale is that an October town meeting, which would fall on the fourth Monday of October under the bylaws, would be very close to the presidential election. And this year, we have early voting in Massachusetts. A presidential election, as Town Clerk Susan Galvin has told us at different times, individually at different times over the years, presidential election year puts an enormous burden on the clerk's office, which does not have a huge staff to begin with. And the early voting is going to be just an added layer of people coming in to vote throughout the month of, I believe most of October, if not all of October, in the month leading up to the election. So she's anticipating a very heavy burden and amount of work on her office, and has indicated that the October special town meeting, or the fall town meeting, if it could be postponed, would be beneficial to her department, especially this first year, and we'll see what the experience is with the early voting. I mean, she's expecting really thousands of people coming in over the course of a month to vote in advance of the election. In discussing this, we pulled out the bylaw, we spoke with town council, and there's really not anything in the bylaws or the statute that permits us to postpone the meeting.
Right.
But the language that's in the bylaw that was enacted by town meeting a few years ago refers to a regular fall town meeting shall meet if required on the fourth Monday in October. And in discussions with town council, the belief was that this board could make a determination that a fall town meeting is not required. If we were to so choose. Speaking as one member of the board, I'm sympathetic to the town clerk's
Yeah, I am
situation, and I
as well.
understand where
I am as
she's
well.
coming from and would like to try to accommodate
But my
her
only
in some way.
concern, my only concern is, and we don't know where the local aid's going to wind up, but there is right now an extra 100,000 over and above, 106,000 over and above what we approved at town meeting. If that does hold up through conference committee, it may be an opportunity to appropriate that money, because it's not one-time money, it's local aid, that, we could potentially bring back some of those things that we deferred, such as the
Code enforcement officer.
code enforcement officer, and, perhaps an assistant town administrator or something like that. If we forego this town meeting, then we would not be able to get that for this year, because it would not, would be, I don't think we'd be able to get it in, would we? We'd have to, because it'd be after the tax rate was set and
The
everything.
tax rate will be set in November, yeah.
So would it make sense to call an, and again, we could think about calling an earlier town meeting, maybe a September town meeting.
Well, the board can call a special town meeting at any
Anytime they
time
want,
that we
right.
think. And that was normally the practice before we went into this regular fall town
Yeah,
meeting. That
exactly.
often a meeting could be held in January or at any time. I was, without having heard of that, I was thinking of if we needed one, if planning board articles or if other things started coming
January or
forward,
something like that, or
we could
yeah,
consider
early
January. Now, I don't know if that would work in terms of the issue you've
I don't
just
think it
raised. I think
would.
we'd have to look into that.
Yeah, but that's the only concern
We're
I
not
have.
really, right now, we do have a letter from one resident indicating they may like to pursue an article, which has not been drafted, and would relate to the dump access road. But and the planning board is working on some zoning articles.
Yes.
Now, Mr. Burns and the town administrator and I met with the planning board about a week or so ago.
It probably won't be ready for October.
Well,
Close.
I don't know. I know that that's what they're targeting, but Alex Whiteside and the planning board did mention that the sign bylaw is not going to be an easy thing to draft.
Right.
And we're already into June. So if there were articles like that were ready before May, but maybe October is a little bit ambitious, then it would be possible to have a special town meeting at another date. It sounds like we may need to look into this issue that you've raised, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a warrant committee's call too, in terms of, how to appropriate the money, or if they want to appropriate
Funding,
the
yes,
yeah.
but the town meeting is within the, calling the town meeting is.
Is our responsibility, yes. So, but, I'm certainly sympathetic to the town clerk's problem this year. I mean, it could be a very big voter turnout, and like you say, all the, absentee ballots, which are becoming more and more prevalent every year. You could see where she'd be pulling her hair out.
Yes. Okay, so it sounds like, the sense I'm getting is that we want to take this under advisement to look into this question that you've raised further, Tom.
Yeah, that's what I'd like to do as well.
Okay. All right, so why don't we defer this, and hopefully we can act on it at our next meeting.
Okay.
Number 11 is a discussion of the Board of Selectmen's FY17 goals and objectives, and the agenda included some topics that have come up in the past, such as communication, development projects, and finances. There may be more that we want to talk about, but the idea was that this could be our first discussion of key objectives. I don't think we want a list of 25 of them for this year, but a finite number of objectives that we are reasonably able to see through to at least make some substantial progress on during the course of the fiscal year.
Yeah, and I think those are three key ones, certainly, and have probably many, many subparts to them when you start thinking them out. But
Yeah, I mean, we've listed communication, development projects, and finances. I think communication is one. I know we've talked about a social media policy in the past, but I think it's far greater than a social media policy. I think, when I look at communication, I think of how are residents, how are they understanding the delivery of services? We had Mr. Kring in here earlier. He talked about a certain department and in what was his mind a failure for delivery of services. Well, whether it was or it wasn't, I believe that we should be driving that out of town hall. I think that you look at the Milton Times and they do a fabulous job. I don't know how many people they have in terms of the amount of people that receive the paper. I think it's probably around 3,000, and that's a guess, right? So don't quote me.
I don't know what the circulation is.
But I don't know what the circulation exactly is. But we are a town of over 27,000 people, and in some ways, and we could get to citizen speak, we have an obligation as a board to make sure that people know what's happening on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, and I think that we do this in a way where it's factual. It's not social media driven. There are some sites out there now that people go on and it's not accurate information all the time. And what it does is it stirs a bee's nest, and it can actually take it the wrong way and take it for a turn and go someplace where it shouldn't.
Right.
And I think we need to control that. So one of the things that I'd like to suggest is that we ask our town administrator to look into some ways and finding out, how we might be able to manage, because we can't fund a position right now. We don't have the luxury of being, a town where we can have a communications expert that can provide, up-to-date tweets and update the social media, regularly, from each town, create a strategic plan that's needed, to communicate from all departments. And I think that when you do that, I think that, your taxpayers, your residents, your constituents, they get what they want, okay? They can dismiss what they want too, but I think that it takes a lot of questions out of what we are doing or trying to do on their behalf on a daily basis, and I think that there's some people out there that can help, that can be of assistance to help us create some sort of communication plan, a strategic plan, while also helping us on a daily basis. Because the last thing that I want to hear again is something that isn't true from a resident because they saw it on a Facebook page.
Right.
Okay?
I agree with you on that.
It's just, it's counterproductive, and I think that, we all care too much here, and that's why we're doing what we do, and we need to support our administration, and I think that those department heads that we have deserve the support as well. I will say, though, that it is incumbent upon the department heads, as public servants, to articulate information on a daily basis to residents that call them or email them. It's to me, I was fortunate enough, or sometimes unfortunate enough, to work for Tom Menino, and that was it. Constituent services 101. They called you called them back, and sometimes you couldn't give them the answer they wanted, but you followed up. So I'd like to see us look at, with the approval of my fellow colleagues, see us look at finding somebody to help us at least get us on a good path.
I think I agree with everything that you've said, David, and I think the website is another area where in the past we've talked about really wanting to revamp and modernize our town website to make it more user-friendly, to have more information there and just presented in a more cohesive fashion. Some other things that we've talked about that fall under communication are possibly a periodic communication, whether it's from the town administrator or somebody on the staff, probably initially through the town administrator, an email blast or some other periodic communication out to residents. And there have been a couple of press releases that have gone out from the office recently. There's more that we can do in that area to get information out to the public about projects that are going on and hopefully alleviate some of this miscommunication or misinformation that often appears on social media.
I mean, you're always going to have that misinformation out there because you can't control what other people want to write in Facebook. But at least you can get our message out, and most likely that message will be picked up and broadcast further on those various social media sites.
And by the journalists, like the Milton Times, the Patriot Ledger, the people who do the factual reporting, and they're the people who we want reporting on this.
Right. And a well-written, thorough press release, I think goes a long way.
It certainly does.
So communication sounds like a priority for all of us, and we'd like to make this a...
Look at all the issues that we're faced with airplane noise. You've got East Milton Deck. You've got, you could go on and on with development projects, with questions about streets, with questions about, trash, all the little things that are basic town services that become the big things.
Right, and just keep people up to date on
Absolutely right.
Yes.
What we're doing, what we can do, what we can't do.
That's right.
It sounds like we have broad agreement that that's a high priority. And we've talked about it at different times in the past, so we formalize it as a priority for FY17. Development projects and finances, we have some, you just mentioned one of them, David, the East Milton Deck project, the Henry's project, probably the Town Farm. Those are some of the key development projects. Town Farm one is really moving towards the planning board, but those are some of the key development projects that have been pending, and I know there's frustration among some of the residents. There are reasons that they've moved more slowly than we would have liked, but I think over the next couple of meetings we'll have more news on projects such as that. But are there others that we, in the nature of development or planning or strategic planning?
I guess the strategic part of it, or the, I mean, those are things that are already there, but more coordination and hopefully the master plan implementation committee all leads into it, and our town planner, our assistant town planner, and kind of working together cohesively to bring about the projects that that the town wants to see. And
utilizing the appointed people, the committees that have done the good work, and
to see
people who are currently up, for example, Dick Burke, who's taken on the business districts, and utilizing people like that and listening to them and responding in an appropriate fashion.
Yeah, and I can report the master plan committee, implementation committee has already had now 2 meetings. We have another one scheduled for later this month, and traffic has been one of the big discussions so I think we'll be able to report more on that after we get through another couple of sessions, but that's been a big focus of that committee. Finances is always, every year, a big topic. And as we're transitioning now to a town administrator who's taking on more of a day-to-day management role, and the board in its new policy role, I circulated, just for information, a copy of a memo from the Amherst Board of Selectmen to the Amherst Town Manager from a few years ago. It was part of the training session that the MMA had that I went to 3 years ago. And because we really weren't in that, this board wasn't really in that role, we were more direct participants in the process. That really hadn't been something that has been done in the past, but that may be something that, whether it's just a discussion at a meeting or a written memo that the board would want to give to the town administrator to set out the board's policies on the budget, such as does the board support or not support a Proposition 2.5 override? What's the policy of the board on collective bargaining strategy and different topics like the capital spending? So again, it doesn't necessarily have to be that formal. We could do something more informal and just have a discussion about it.
Yep.
But that may be something that we should be thinking about as we go through the summer months.
I agree.
Any other goals and objectives? And obviously, we can continue this discussion at a future date.
I think we'll probably all have maybe one or two more.
Yeah.
Maybe we could
I'll
continue
give it
that.
thought.
Okay. Okay, well, at least we have, I think, some initial helpful feedback, hopefully, for the town administrator. Item 12 on our agenda is ratification of letters that we have signed for the Milton Foundation for Education Teacher of the Year Awards.
All right, so I'll propose a motion to ratify the letters of congratulation to the following teachers who are recipients of the 2016 Milton Foundation for Education Teacher of the Year Award. Richard, is it Garino? Garino. Sundari Baker, Ezra Bayou Koza.
Make it easier now, Tom.
I apologize for mispronouncing the names. Sarah Smith, that one I can pronounce. Kate Lavalle, Genevieve Martland, and Dr. Noreen Diamond Burdette.
I'll second that motion.
Any discussion? The only thing I wanted to point out is, I believe the others are all remaining on with the school department, but Dr. Noreen Diamond Burdette has served, I believe, for over 40 years with the Milton School Department and has just done a fabulous job as the music department leader for the school department. She and her students, the high school band and the high school chorus, participated, and the plans were jumbled at the last minute because of the weather, but for our Memorial Day exercise that Mr. Burns and I both spoke at, and the town administrator, and Barbara Martin from our office really did a lot of work for that event, along with our veterans agent, Kevin Cook, and Therese Desmond, and the members of the Legion Post. But Dr. Burdette and her students really made the day, I think. There were a lot of special things like the challenge coins that were given that day, but the music, really, the patriotic music that the chorus sang, the band played, even with a smaller band, because they all had to fit into the Council on Aging building, they really did a tremendous job. So just to recognize Dr. Burdette on behalf of the town side, I'm sure the school committee has given her a lot of recognition already, but on behalf of the town side, I think it'd be nice for this board just to publicly recognize all that she's contributed over the years, and especially for the Veterans Day and the Memorial Day services, which are under our
No question.
Absolutely.
I was very fortunate to have Dr. Burdette in chorus way back when I was in Pierce School.
Now, did you join that special alumni chorus that they had for her recently?
She wouldn't have wanted me on. But she was tremendous. She made something out of nothing. But it's just amazing. That was an amazing. I'm glad you brought that up about the Memorial Day, the a cappella group. It was just unbelievable. And boy, she's going to be missed. I know that. I'm sure. The way she is in. There will be something very strong coming behind her, and already is. I mean, the music program's fabulous. Yes. I see it in the elementary schools, and we're very fortunate. But she will be missed, and incredible. I mean, really an icon when it comes to this stuff.
Yes, that's a good word. All right, so any other discussion? And if not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. Our next item is approval of 2 one-day liquor licenses.
I'll propose a motion to approve a one-day liquor license for Jim Scherer Studio for an artist reception to be held in the second floor hallway of the Fruit Center Marketplace at 10 Bassett Street on June 30th, 2016, from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m.
Second.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I'll propose a motion to approve a one-day liquor license for We Are Milton at Hutchinson Field for a music fest and fireworks on Saturday, June 25th, 2016, from 3 p.m. to 10 p.m., and for Celtic Sunday on Sunday, June 26, 2016, from 12 p.m. to 8 p.m.
Second.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Should be a great event. Let's hope this Sunday doesn't get washed out like last year, but
It's a nice event for residents to attend.
it really is.
The group does a lot of work to prepare for that. We have on our agenda, number 14, an approval of the agreement with the Milton Public Library Staff Association. I'll ask the town administrator to update us on this.
Yes, Madam Chair, this is the library union. This is a successfully negotiated contract for a 3-year contract, fiscal 17, 18, and 19. 2% wage adjustment for each year, a 20-year step at 1%, which means you have to work for the town of Milton and the library department for 20 years, and a change in health insurance. That's huge for the town that we got that. It's in fiscal 18, it's a 2% swing in premium. So right now, it's 80-20 split. It will go to a 78-22 split. In fiscal 18 and fiscal 19, it will go to 76-24 split. If you calculated just on today's insurance numbers, it's an approximate quarter of $250,000 savings each one of those years.
That is huge.
It's huge. It's huge, and
because this is probably the first time people are really hearing this on TV, although, because I don't know if the teachers were the first, but it was really this board along with the school committee that kind of worked collectively to kind of get this done, health insurance is one of our biggest numbers on the budget, along with pension, but and to try and get some control over it is a huge win.
absolutely.
It's a considerable savings, and it stemmed initially from our vote last December on adopting some state statutes. But I think we have to give credit to the former chair of the school committee who led the negotiations with the teachers, and that was Mike Zulus, who has stepped down from the school committee, but did most of the negotiating, and that was the lead union to have the discussion with, and that really led the other unions. So that is a very good result.
I agree. There was some other minor changes, just grammatical changes that I won't go into, but those were the key components of this negotiation for this 3-year contract.
And we did receive a copy of it.
Yes.
Do we have any further discussion on this, or if not, do we have a motion to approve the agreement?
I don't have any more discussion. I'll move to approve the agreement for a 3-year contract with the Milton Public Library Staff Association.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion, other than thank you to the town administrator for all of her negotiating on this with this union?
One down,
And the other
6
unions.
more to go.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Now we're on to several appointments. First one is for the Peabody Fund.
I'll propose a motion to reappoint Diane Ferrari of 90 Governors Road as the agent for the Peabody Fund to serve through June of 2017.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Number 16 is Town Council.
I'll propose a motion to appoint John Flynn of Murphy, Hesse, Toomey, and Lehane, LLP, as Town Council to serve through June 2017.
I'll second that motion.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Number 17 is the Bicycle Advisory Committee.
Propose a motion to appoint Bruce Talanian of 54 Old Farm Road and Joseph Sloan of 55 Concord Avenue, and to reappoint Thomas Bukow of 8 Cantwell Road, Hugh Stringer of 549 Elliott Street, Michael Blackwell of 357 Blue Hill Parkway, Lee Toma of 58 Aberdeen Road, and Eric Ask of 10 Stoddard Lane to the Bicycle Advisory Committee to serve through May of 2017.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Why don't we save our thanks for all of these people until the very end? We've got several to appoint.
Yes.
Okay, number 18 is the Board of Registrars.
I'll propose a motion to reappoint Francis Westhaver of 17 Manning Lane to the Board of Registers to serve through May 2019.
I'll second that.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Conservation Commission.
Propose a motion to reappoint John Kiernan of 170 Cabot Street to the Conservation Commission to serve through May of 2019.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Council on Aging, we have a revised motion.
Yep, so I'll propose a motion to reappoint Virginia Hannigan of 20 Houston Ave and Margaret Flaherty of 24 Brackett Street to the Council on Aging to serve through June 2017.
Second that?
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Sign Review Committee, we have 2 new members.
Propose a motion to appoint Paul Doherty of 8 Thistle Avenue and Douglas Sybeck of 198 Church Street to the Sign Review Committee to serve through December of 2016.
Second.
And I will thank them all at the end, but this one has gotten some discussion over the last few months. I think it's important to note both of these residents who are willing to serve live not far from at least the key business, the largest business district in town, and that's where most of the sign applications come out of. And I think they'll both bring to this committee the perspective of the neighborhood and the residents at large. So very glad that they're willing to serve. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Swift Hat Shop.
I'll propose a motion to appoint Janet Christensen of 24 Gordon Road to the Swift Hat Shop Preservation Committee to serve through March 2017.
I'll second that.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you to all of these volunteers we've just appointed or reappointed to various committees for
Yes,
their
thanks for all your
willingness
service.
to serve the town. Okay, we're now back to the town administrator's report, and I don't know if the town administrator had other items.
Yes, Madam Chair, I do, thank you. I wanted to take this opportunity to also extend my thanks and appreciation to Police Chief Richard Wells. I worked with Richard Wells for 21 years in different capacities. He was always there to lend a hand in any issue that came up. I can't go and name every issue individually, but one that comes to mind, as you all know, is the horrific winter we had 2 years ago. And Chief Wells really did step up, and he helped to bring a team together to get us through that terrible winter. And he was very instrumental in pulling everybody together and moving forward and getting the town back on the right track. And he's been a pleasure to work with. He loves the town. He's got a huge heart, and I wish him well in his next chapter in his life.
Certainly second that. And like I said many times, I think the chief was a great ambassador for the Milton Police Department. And he truly did, does like to help people.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And he certainly showed that over the years.
Mm-hmm.
In the year that I've worked here, I could easily see how much love he had for the town, and
Mm-hmm.
and certainly some of the people that came out to support him in many capacities, and so I again wish him well and thank him for his service, and we're very fortunate to have him.
And I agree with those comments, and did wish him well earlier in the evening, so very nice words to the town administrator.
The other things I'd like to just let the board know about are some road races and walks that I've approved recently, which I think are important to mention and give airtime to. The Milton Road Race on Tuesday, June 14th. The Saturday and Sunday, the McKeon Post, June 19th. It's a Father's Day scholarship race, and it goes through mostly Dorchester, but it does come up Granite Ave and go down Hope Ave and then back down Granite Ave again. So that does impact part of Milton streets. And the Avon Walk for Breast Cancer, July 9th and 10th, which encompasses a number of streets in the town. It starts at 138, then comes down Canton Ave, and then it has a water break at Ullin Skating Rink, and then goes down Blue Hill Parkway, and then takes some side streets and ends
Goes
up...
through Paul Park.
So it does impact a number of streets. So again, that's July 9th and 10th. And then the Strawberry Festival will be held on the town gazebo on Saturday, June 18th. So those are some exciting events that recently were approved, and I just wanted to let you know about those, in case you want to run in the road races.
Out of commission right now.
All right. Is that everything?
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Under the Chair's report, we've already covered the Memorial Day event. I was just going to bring up what a nice event that was, and again, how well the core group of people working on that did to pull off a last-minute change of the plans, and that was our Veterans Agent Kevin Cook, Therese Desmond, the Cemetery Superintendent, Frank Stout, and all the members of the Legion Post, and Barbara Martin of our office, who really spent a lot of time on the Sunday before Memorial Day, either here or over at the Council on Aging, trying to make some last-minute arrangements, and it went very well. I think the people, the 6 World War II veterans who received the special recognition really appreciated the ceremony. And again, the music group did an excellent job. That's really all that I had to report. We've already talked about the planning board meeting, so that's all I have to report tonight. Members' reports.
Yeah, I want to thank, we had a resident who reached out to us related to the girls.
Are you going to cover the same thing?
Well, we can cover it in tandem.
Okay. All right, that sounds good.
You know, the girls' track team, okay? You know, Coach Shaw, I think, brought home 3 state champion trophies this year. And just recently, on Saturday, the girls' track team won the all-state. That means all divisions, whether you're a major-size high school or a small size. That's an incredible feat.
Sure.
And, you know, we did cover the high school football team because it was a really big deal for the town with the size, the capacity of the people that went and saw it. But realizing that these girls in this track team, these teams have really accomplished something unprecedented, and they deserve as much accolade, if not more, than any other teams that have played in this town. And so what I'd like to propose is that maybe on our June 22nd meeting, before they get out of school, we invite them into...
I've actually already talked to the town administrator about that today, so that's why I didn't bring it up. But we do want to congratulate.
You know, I really think
publicly
it would be
recognize them.
fitting, because it really is incredible what they've accomplished.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, it's amazing when you look throughout the years. Well, first of all, the number of young women athletes that we have in this town and throughout the Commonwealth, really, but also how women's athletics has just evolved, especially at the scholastic level over the years. When I think back to, when I was, back in high school, it was, you had all the men's team, the boys teams, but the girls teams always got short shifted. A lot of them were intramural sports. They weren't, traveling sports, and they've come a long way.
Things have changed, and just looking at the girls hockey team that went through the state playoffs, the amount of support that they gained from their male counterparts.
Yes.
And it's great. It's great to see. It's great for the town, and it's a real credit to Coach Shaw and all of the coaches at the high school and the administration for their leadership.
Yep. That's great to see. It really is. Because it makes a fully rounded person, I think. Yeah.
No question.
Yes, we're going to try to see what we can do for the 22nd to give them some kind of recognition.
I agree.
Absolutely. Anything else anyone has to report?
No.
Citizen speak response. We did touch on it a little bit. I think I probably should say a few more words, since I did have some involvement over the last year and a half with this situation. The resident, Mr. Kring, who was in earlier today with the Elliott Street situation, it has been a frustrating situation for him.
Yes.
However, the Public Works Department really has only been involved in it at the very end. Now, the Public Works Director is a member of the Traffic Commission. This has really been a Traffic Commission issue. And as both Chief Wells said and I said, there really wasn't anything legally in place that we could have done for the resident initially. We really had to look at some other options about what some other towns have done.
Get creative and, yeah.
And that's where, in actually, the winter of 2015 with the over 100 inches of snow delayed a lot of it. So from late 2014 right into the spring of 2015, the winter kept canceling a lot of our meetings. But it was really a matter of the Traffic Commission exploring some options, and that's where Tim Zerwinski, the assistant town planner, came in, and he spent a fair amount of time looking at some creative ideas and how we might address this situation, especially in business districts, knowing that precedent for other areas was a big concern.
Right.
So I understand the frustration that the resident has about the lengthy delays, and the more recent situation with Public Works, that really, I think, was a miscommunication between members of the Traffic Commission as to what was being submitted, what the Traffic Commission was voting on, what was being submitted to us for voting, and that's why we had to rescind the vote tonight. But the signs are in place, it has been remedied, and the Public Works Director, again, his involvement in it was pretty late in the game. It was not the course of a year and a half, it was these past few weeks.
Yeah, that's why I did really want to get him to say a couple of words, and
Yes.
his own defense.
Yeah, I understood the residents' concern. I
frustration,
didn't think he
yeah.
had crossed a line. Sometimes we've had that happen, but I think giving Mr. Lynch an opportunity to respond and explain the technical glitch, which there was worthwhile.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyone else have anything on that matter?
No, I think that pretty much says it.
Any other citizens speak? This is the only one tonight, but anything from a prior meeting? Then if not, future agenda items. I know that for the stormwater hearing, that's going to be on the 22nd?
Yes.
22nd meeting, stormwater hearing, yes, and that's been advertised.
Yeah, so that's to
That's to set
kinda
the
set the rate. and
regulations.
Regulations too, yeah.
But has there been, Mr. Gordon was in here the last meeting asking some questions, and the last I heard, we were
Wrap them
looking
up
to
to
get that
Wrap them up to
information.
Joe.
Joe
yeah.
was going to be reaching out, it's my understanding, and I will follow up with him tomorrow. but
Because I think we'll need to address that at the hearing on
Yes.
the 22nd.
Yes.
And if there are any other open questions, I don't think there are. I think the other questions that came up at the prior hearings have been answered. But if not, we'll need to include that. Do we have any other future agenda items, other than what we've talked about tonight?
Let's see, I'm trying to get the, what do you call it, the Yule and Rink. They haven't met in quite a while, but I would like to see I'd like to have them come before us, or a representative come before us, and try and get that committee back on track and get a written
Report.
a written report, yeah, something we can run with. I did talk to Walter Timothy's office last week, and he's going to reach out to Commissioner Roy, because the last time we had a meeting with Commissioner Roy was going to look into some things and get back to us with some recommendations, and
Okay.
we haven't heard anything since that meeting, so.
Okay, so Yule and Rink update, the stormwater. Anything else for a future agenda item? I know financial policies.
Policies, yeah, and that's on a,
That's on.
You
for
each have your
Yeah.
charges
Yeah,
on
I
which
was
section you
doing a
want.
little bit of work on them when I had some
I
free
have
time this
mine.
week that I thought I'd circulate just so, and,
I can circulate mine. I have
Okay.
mine done as
Good.
well, so.
okay.
all right, so we may be able to put that on in early July. Then if nothing else, we are on to executive session, so I will move.
If you don't mind me going back just to member reports for just one second,
Sure.
because I just thought of something.
Okay.
Tomorrow night, Joe Lynch and myself are being recognized by the Neponset Watershed Association for being one of the first communities to
Oh.
have implemented stormwater utility. So the watershed's having their annual meeting tomorrow night, so they are going to recognize us, hopefully.
Congratulations.
Round of applause, so.
Nice.
Just
That's great.
And where is that being held, Tom?
at the, in Dedham, at the, what's the estate there in Dedham?
Endicott?
Endicott, yeah.
Oh, beautiful.
Oh, congratulations. All right, then I'll move that we enter into executive session to discuss negotiating strategy with respect to non-union personnel, town administrator, and to discuss strategy with regards to litigation, airplane noise, believing that having such discussions in open session would have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the body, and to return to open session for the purpose of adjourning.
Second.
Mr. Hurley?
Yes.
Mr. Burns?
Yes.
And myself, yes. So we are now in executive session.